guys, welcome back to my channel. This time it's gonna be a battle report for a practice game for the Bloodstorm Return of the Beast event, which is going to be held today actually, on the release of the video. So that's the 15th of May 2022. This practice game I played against a friend of mine, and we just wanted to try out our lists before the event. There's some special scenarios in the event, so we try to play around with those. First, I'll go to my list. So my list is a Dread Elf Horde army. I don't think it's like a term, but I decided to take just as many spears as I could. They are the cheapest Dread Elf infantry. I would say that Dread Elf infantry is quite decent in what it does. I thought that this would be a fun list for the event, because it also doesn't really play strong in a lot of different phases, and it enables my opponent to just kill a lot of stuff, which is always good fun for your opponent. So I still think the list packs quite some punch with all these guys hitting on quite often 2+, sometimes 3+, and wounding with effectively strength 4 in the first time of combat. With agility 6 on the charge or 7 if they get charged because of the spears. Yeah, it's. I hope everybody finds it a fun list. Then we go to Nick. Nick plays Saurian Ancients. He plays a Quaddle Lord with some Saurian Warriors, 2 units of Raptor Riders with a Saurian Veteran on a Raptor, and 2 Taurosaurs. It's kind of a basic list in that sense that everything just wants to get in combat, and wants to do well in combat. Yeah, matchup wise, I don't really know what I should expect, to be honest. I mean, these Taurosaurs, they can be really nasty to my infantry. I have them seen delete like 15 Flagellants on the charge before. So 15 Red Elf or 20 Red Elf Spearmen should not be that much of an issue. However, with 3 units per Taurosaur, more or less, I could hopefully deal with them. And then my great weapon guy is going to be quite influential this game. Then let's get into the game. We are playing a scenario where we deploy according to counter thrust, so you're pushing away your enemy units 20 inches away from your own units. And then for the secondaries, we have one secondary where you have to charge an enemy unit in the rear with one of your scoring units. And otherwise, we have a scenario where you have to have one of your characters be in the enemy deployment zone at some point during the game, starting from turn 4. And the last one is that I have to just quickly check this, because I actually don't remember anymore. That you have to choose an enemy scoring unit, and that unit has to be removed at the end of the game. So going into the game, I am deploying just one block of spearmen on the right, one block of spearmen on the left. I see that my opponent is deploying one unit of Saurus cavalry all the way on the flank, and I am quite aware that my list is not really mobile. So I actually don't really want to deploy anything on any flank if I can avoid it. Also, currently the board state, I do have the water feature on my right side. This is not basically where I want to put any infantry, because dangerous terrain tests are still quite a thing, and you can really spike with dangerous terrain tests. So if you roll like 5 once and then you fail your panic test, and your whole unit is just gone. And I have experienced stuff like that before already. As the recording quality was not up to standard in terms of light, I did modify the recording a little bit. I still have to get proper lighting in the room for these recordings. Also, you do note that we deploy one by one, more or less, all of our units. This is also because at the Bloodstorm event, it's only possible to get a +2 for first turn. You can't get any more than +2. So it doesn't really make sense to drop everything, because in that regard, you don't really win anything from doing so, because the chances that your opponent is gonna have first turn are still quite big. Yeah, then I just move up my lines basically, and in hindsight, I actually overcommit on the right side, but I really wanted to make sure that I caught this cavalry because otherwise, if I don't, then um, I don't really get any benefit from having two units on the right flank at all because then my opponent's cavalry can still get away. I didn't want them to be able to get away from there. This unit that my opponent is charging now with the Saurus cavalry on the right, that has my Dreadlord in it. So I thought that was kind of a weird decision. However, my opponent argued that, well, it was going to happen anyway. That he was going to have an engagement with this Horus Cav with one of my spears, and that was the best unit to go for because if he does manage to break me, it's going to be now. If he doesn't, then well, the unit is not in good state anyway. He does charge in with both of his Taurosaurs on my warriors that are close to the ruins. He was hoping to get one of them in, and then he actually got both of them in. And I think maybe for him this is less of an advantage because otherwise he would have a Taurosaur that could still would have had a failed charge. He could still push up some Saurus warriors and then have a Taurosaur later to charge something else. Yeah, and all the way on the left flank, the other Saurus cavalry unit charged into my spears. I feel like I should have played a bit differently, focusing a bit more with my army on where my opponent was going to be, because I have two excess units now on the right that I don't really need there. And otherwise, well, I do have to sacrifice one unit to draw out the charge of the Taurosaurs, which is fine. I just hope that the panic tests are going to be okay, and I might even do a wound or two to the Taurosaurs. Then I have some counter charges ready, so I have the unit on the left side of the ruins that has to go through the ruins, obviously, but that could be fine. And then I have my unit in the bottom that I can use to also charge a Taurosaur if my unit gets kind of decimated by the Taurosaurs. Yeah, and then I have a unit of Saurian warriors that blocks me from charging the flank of the Taurosaur if the Taurosaur decides to stick. So in this sense, he can actually stick with the Taurosaur. If he does use the Saurus warriors to really chaff up my charges there, it does mean I can get two units of mine into his one unit of Saurian warriors, and then I would have an overrun into the Slan and his bodyguard unit. Well, they don't have bodyguard, but his mage bunker, if you want to call a unit of Saurian warriors a mage bunker. We're going to combat on the right side, my lord. I believe I issue a challenge, a duel, and then I forget that my opponent loses attacks when I hit him. So I actually give my opponent full attacks. And I believe he does like 2 wounds on my lord, and I managed to kill. And I didn't manage to kill his lord. I put like 2 wounds on his lord. But then again, the next turn I'm gonna strike first. I'm probably gonna kill his lord, and then that will be fine. On the left side, I do manage to hold my ground against the Saurus cavalry charge. With my AB2, I actually don't manage to do that much damage even, because I only managed to remove 2 models. And then the Taurosaurs, well, they charge in, they are gonna completely decimate my unit. I'm just using dice to mark how many models that I've lost so far. And then we are looking into the overrun. I do pass my panic test on the unit on the right of my unit. And then my opponent, I believe, he makes it with one of the Taurosaurs and the other doesn't make it. So we will get to see whether one Taurosaur is already enough to break one of my units on the charge, and I think it will be. It's also quite dependent on the Thunderstomp, obviously. If my opponent has a very successful Thunderstomp with a 6 and then does 6 wounds, then there's a lot of combat rest that's going to be gone. So I do charge in to the flank of the Taurosaur, and I believe I lose like 4 or 5 models to the ruins. Ruins are killing, man. It's like you don't. It's also a bit dual because you don't remember the cases where the ruins don't deal any wounds to you, and you do remember the cases where in a unit of 20 you lose 6 models. So yeah. And then yeah, I just immediately go into combat. I can imagine that people might think it's a list that takes quite some time to play because you have so many models. However, I do have like a total of 10 units to move, and I don't shoot, I don't do magic. So, and my movement options with the units, I do have 10-inch movement, but then again, the movement options are still quite limited because I can only like wheel and move forward 10 inches. I don't even have any musicians on any units, except for one, I believe, because I had some points left. But I prioritized more bodies over a musician in my units, arguing basically that, well, there's going to be units everywhere anyway, and if I lose a unit, it's not even too bad. So the unit that flank charged the Taurosaur got fully wiped, and the unit that received the charge from a Taurosaur actually kills it. Yeah, that's quite interesting, isn't it? I believe the Taurosaur that had the overrun already had taken 3 wounds. Um, then again, I do have like, how many attacks do I have? Something like 12 attacks in the first round because I focused on that one. And then 12 attacks that hit on 2 plus, that wound on 5 plus, and then RAP 2, so he has a 5-up save over. And then in the second unit, when he goes in, I actually have 17 attacks on him after impact hits. Yeah, that's not too bad. 17, is that right? Yeah, I think so. Wait, no, I only have 13 attacks. Yeah, so the other Saurus Warriors unit that we charged earlier, that does break. It doesn't result in a panic test for my opponent's Slan, but I do get an overrun with one of my units, and this is basically just a point where where my unit is going to get decimated. Because one unit, 1 versus 1, I'm not going to pull it through. And my opponent now actually has a charge on one of my spear units that's going to just flee away. And then in the end, I mean, I do have a lot of units, but they do bleed quite quickly. Like competitively, if it were like a competitive tournament, I don't think I would bring this list because a lot of your play is actually being decided by where your units are, and you can't really change it too much because you only have move 10 on every unit. So it would be quite valuable to have some assassins in the list. It would be quite valuable to have some corsairs for light troops, some chaffs, some shadow riders. But basically, yeah, I think the spears, they actually perform well enough in terms of combat power. Like you don't really need any of the special infantry to really pull your weight with Dread Elves. Because also with a Rending Banner, you go up to AP3 when you're being charged. So AP is not really that much of a problem if you use Rending Banner. But then again, a Rending Banner is also quite expensive suddenly for a 20-man unit. So then you would want to play maybe 1 30-man unit. Then again, at some point, points also start to come back at you when you do want to include chaff, when you do want to include a wizard maybe, all kinds of stuff like that. And then probably you will end up with at most like 3 combat units, and then the purpose of the list kind of falls apart again. Yeah, so at this point, everything is kind of dying on the left side. We have Saurians that are still surviving, and I do have one unit that can countercharge the Taurosaur of my opponent in the flank, so I'm just hoping that this will go right. We are working out the combat with the Saurius warriors on the top left, and I believe that either now or the next turn I am gonna remove the Quarter Lord of my opponent so he doesn't have any magic anymore. And that is obviously quite a win. Yeah, scenario-wise, so I still have to make the rear charge onto my opponent's unit, for me with any unit. I still have to kill off his Saurians that have the Slan inside. I believe that was the objective for me. And I still have to move my character into his deployment zone. And then otherwise, I believe we're counting victory points, but there's quite a big margin for it to be a draw, like on the 3,500 scale, if you have up to 1,500 points difference, I believe, if I remember correctly, it is going to be counted as a draw. So yeah, there's quite a likelihood of a draw happening there. So it's really the secondary scenarios that you should be playing on, in my opinion. And then yeah, that doesn't matter too much, unless you really table your opponent. However, I'm not expecting that with just units of 20 Dread Elves. On the left side, I do manage to remove my opponent's cavalry finally. It's a long grind, but it's worth the wait, let's say. And then, yeah, my turn is basically I charge the Thorasaur on the flank, I move up my units from the right, and I have like my second army by now coming up to support my my losses that I have gained earlier in the game. Yeah, it's the game is progressing quite well. It's going quite as expected, to be honest, with my opponent holding his flank quite sturdily, and me trying to reassign my units. So this is clearly a case of just misdeploying, and I should have caught that earlier, basically. So I'm just hoping that I can still remove the second Tarsar from the game. However, it is still quite dicey because I do have to kill it, and otherwise it's going to get a thunderstorm that can just change the entire charge, basically. So here's a situation where something like the wheel turns would really change the outcome of the fight. Yeah, my opponent is basically just reassigning his units to keep his left flank or his right flank clean, left side of the board, and basically he's also just agreeing to a draw in terms of points. I think maybe I do have a minor win in terms of points because I did remove the Quattle Lord, and I still have. Well, at this moment I still have like 6 of my blocks left. However, this Taurosaur is going crazy, which means that I believe I actually lose this combat, and then he's gonna pursue me and run me down. So yeah, he still has a Taurosaur, he still has 2 units of Saurian warriors, and I believe he still had 1 Saurus cavalry that had rallied. I do move up this turn my Dreadlord to contest the or to score the secondary and get my 1 point. It's a bit of a shame because I think that my Dreadlord would be well suited to deal with the Taurosaur. And I do have 1 unit that rallied, that has 1 model left. And I am really hoping that my opponent is just going to walk away with his Taurosaur to my other units, so that I can get my rear charge on his Taurosaur, so I can score another objective point. I think that's also quite funny with this type of list, that I can actually just break from combat somewhere, rally at some point, and then any unit that I have that can charge can score this objective of charging someone in the rear. And I don't think for that purpose it does count if you charge someone who is fleeing and then charge them in the rear. I don't know, actually. Yeah, so my opponent is just reorganizing his lines a bit. He is thinking about the Taurosaur, and he unfortunately doesn't give me the rear charge that I would have wanted. He's just trying to keep his points at this point. And I think that I don't actually know if he scored any secondaries, because he didn't charge me in the rear. He didn't move his character in my deployment zone. He might have killed my... Oh, he didn't kill my unit yet. My dedicated secondary objective unit. because that was the unit that was just killed, the one guy that was just left. So he didn't kill it yet, and then he brought in the skinks to kill off my last guy from that unit. So in the end, we are both scoring one objective point. Torsor does get killed by my spearman, and I'm quite happy about that. And then points wise, I believe it's in my favor, but I don't know if I break the 1,500 points there. So I guess we still counted it out, and then it was a draw. But this is basically the game. There's still some Dread Elves left. There's still some Saurians left, but it basically was a bloodbath. If you see the amount of Dread Elves that I have on the right side, then yeah, a lot is gonna die. Because this was not necessarily a matchup where I thought that it was really scary for me. However, Saurians can always still grind quite well, mostly also because of strength 4, resilience 4, 4 up or 3 up armor save on the Saurian warriors, and a minimized discipline. That can be double minimized with divination. And a BSB. They're not going to go anywhere. Yeah, so that was my practice game. Next time I'll fix the lighting a bit better, and yeah, I wish everybody at the tournament today a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm curious to the awesome tales that people will be going home with. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you the next time.